things like, we'll have to move 200 chairs out of the room, then move them back in for 3:30. What? And that was a bit of a logistics issue. Like, it's going to take a while to do that. And it's not necessary to do the Eye of God journey in a Chandra configuration, at least not here. They're letting us know that the next couple of workshops that lead up to FOL are going to have the option of people wanting to do large group geometrics with us to assist in anchoring each of the large frequencies that are coming in that have to do with the Sala Kali chamber. So what we'll do is, I'm not sure, what time do you want to bring people together for that? Because the journey is, you don't have to do a lot of training for the journey, but at some point we're going to need to get your training, how you give, even in the 12 types classes, a basic rundown on how to do the later one, because the big one where we're asked to go into Chandra together is the one that's going to be run at night, in the evening, after all of the big stuff is released, because that's when the big frequencies are anchoring. And you don't have to, with any of this stuff, any of the techniques we've ever offered, nobody ever has to participate. There's no group pressure. Nobody's going to be mad at you or upset with you. If you don't want to, it's okay. It would help if you could let us know, though, because when we're doing Chandras, we need to know the head count. So we know how many people are there, which positions, are going to be filled, and then they get broken into, like, who's running male energy, who's running female energy, who's running androgen energy. And that doesn't necessarily, we always get these people like, yeah, I'm a woman, but I want to run male energy tonight, and you can, right? You don't have to be stuck with the gender your body has. You can run whatever you feel most comfortable with at that time, and then you can change it next time you do a Chandra. So anyway, we're going to do the journey to the Eye of God, and this will help too, because the beloveds did point out that there's a lot of people that have traveled a lot to get here, and they're tired to begin with when you come off planes and all that. And then we already know we're going to be up late tomorrow night, or tonight, or whatever it is, Sunday night going into Monday, right? To do that to you 2 nights in a row when we don't have to isn't fair, especially to the people who are really tired. Because the Eye of God journey, you will still pick up the frequencies if you fall asleep during it. But the experience of it, where you have memory of it, and to be able to feel it and like get into it, because this has been one of the most moving ones. I remember when it came through, and usually I'm distracted enough by they're showing me the next bit, because it comes through live when those can come through. And when the Eye of God journey came through, even though I was having to have part of my consciousness listen directly to them as they're like showing me maps and saying, okay, now turn right, now turn left, do this, do that, go up here, go down there, because we're using the maps that you'll see in a little bit. It still I felt this, it doesn't even have a word, but it was like a sigh of relief, of just being surrounded by love, like none of the other things we've ever done. And we've had lots of that bits coming in. But this is a very precious journey. It also gets stronger the more you use it. Like, eventually we will have it out where everybody can use it, put the headset on and go in your bedroom and right to the Eye of God kind of thing. You can go, once you go on this journey once, even if you never hear the tape again, if you can just remember key little bits, the ones that seem to have the strongest feel for you, you can just bring those back to mind when you want to project. And projection is gliding. That is the beginning before you can slide. All right, so we will do that anyway for 1212, and we will get you to understand what that is, so you know what the Eye of God journey is about. The frequencies activated in the group at that time for 1212, it's closer to the evening time when we will be doing the large Chandra, and that's better than like doing it tonight, particularly if a bunch of people go to sleep, because it means they anchored it, but they anchored it in the astral, and it didn't get into their physical body yet. Those frequencies will come in, but it can take them a week or so to filter down from the astral field into the D3, D2, and D1 field, so they affect, what your body can hold here. So it would be better if you're, more awake and fresh and can enjoy the Eye of God journey, not just sleep through it and be glad you got there even though you can't remember. So I hope you don't mind, but we were asked to change that for the first thing that we will do tomorrow. And instead of having you wait till 3:30 for me to come in with graphs again, and as we'll take you, through that one. And we'll learn what we need to tonight for that on the rest of the graphs here. Then we will, I don't know what my day is going to look like. Well, starting when I leave here tonight, I have to get some sleep or I'm just going to fall over. And that's usually about 2 to 3 hours, and it's like 8 to me. So if I can get that in, I've seen some of the graphology that goes with the information they're giving us. There's no way I'm going to get all of that done in the period of time we have here. It's at least 2 weeks of graphing. But there's enough that I can probably use the graphs we have and a few extra ones and a couple base graphs. They had me prepare and I didn't know why before we left. I will be able to get the graphs together for you. So you can see enough, and I can explain where, yeah, there's about 5 graphs that go in between here and here, and 5 that go in between here and here. But it will get you through the information that we're all learning together, because the information on the Dale, we're just being given, bits of it. And all of the things that are on the itinerary as far as the teaching parts, what we're going to learn about tomorrow, these are 99% new to both Az and I. And, so it's going to be an interesting night for us as we get the information in and try to put it in legible form on a Mylar so we can pick up tomorrow, hopefully at 3:30. We try. Anyway, it might be a bit later, but we have to work with Guardian time when these kind of data flows come in. We don't have a choice. We can't say, well, we're not going to take it down if we don't, send it down at this time. I really wonder, though, when it's night here, is it day there? So that's normal hours for them? Right? Yeah, I mentioned that to Az, and he said, do they even have night there? I don't know. Yeah, I haven't asked, actually. So anyway, what we're going to do is go through, get through these graphs now. You've got through the Rasha body. You've got through the Big Bang, and you see where that fits. Now, what we're going to move into next, I believe, what should be next, yes, is seeing how that sequence that you just saw, that was the first time it happens as creation continues to grow, okay? So you had this first unicized seed atom born, the tar, and then the first seed atom, went through the Rosetta cycle, then to the first seed atom, and then from the first seed atom came the Rasha body, layers and layers and layers, and from that came the Eupatharista outer light body layers. That pertains to the inner domain. Now, the inner domain, the light body cycles are referred to as this. Now, these are the cycles of they're the equivalent of the tachyon cycles that we talked about with the Tarn. All right, the light body cycles are the E-yuga cycles. All right, there isn't a yuga cycle that goes with the core, but the seed atom, unicide, is born here and starts the inner one. So there's stuff that we're going to learn about that has to do with beyond the creation point door, where the spirit body is, that actually births out the light body, because there is a light body here too, and therefore the core cycle also has an E-yuga cycle. Now, the cycles of the Rasha body, the dark matter template, that are what the light body forms on in any one of the domains, they are considered the Navajo cycles. So there are cycles within cycles here. And when the Navajo cycles, the Navajo creates the birth of Partakai 1 and Partakai 2 again. Now, once the first creation is done, there is a natural cycling of all of these cycles where the Rasha will cycle, where the Tarn will cycle, and it will send energy out to the Rosetta will cycle, will send energy out to the seed atom will cycle and send energy to the pranaseed will cycle and charge the Rasha body, and the Rasha body will charge and send it out through what is the creation point there? I'm trying to think that that might be where dollies fit in. I don't know. There is something in that center point of the light body that connects into the prana seed of the Rasha body. So there's naturally cycles where there's bursts of energy that are released out through the whole sequence to charge the bodies and replenish them. And then there's natural cycles of phasing that occur where sparks are being generated, more quantum being generated, and then that generated quantum is sent back into source as backflow, and then there would be a cycle of backflow return. So all these cycles are really about the opening and closing of like a tube of energy that runs through the center of a very large sphere with many, 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 many little spheres inside of it. And at the first point inside that sphere, that is the cosmic creation, would be the first creation point. And later we'll get into what's in front of it and what's in back of it, kind of thing. But if we can understand that what we just saw as the light-born cycle, the star-born cycle, and the life-born cycle, that leads up, the life-born cycle of the Rasha, leads up to the birth of the outer domain, level or outer sheathed body of the outer light body. And that starts the process, once that phases, starts the process all over again of the creation for the next set out. So we'll learn about what, behind the creation point door, created the light body for here and the Rasha body. And I think the light body for here, the Rasha body for here, I think it's the Pardaki. That's just something that just started to be coming in with a whole bunch of other scribbly stuff today. But here is the point where we would have the Unisai seed atom, which means the Unisai seed atom was the place where the next would be the Rasha cycle for the inner domain, because it's the inner seed atom. It implies that before the inner seed atom, there was a Naveho cycle, right? A prana exchange cycle of the Rasha that corresponds to the core, and that would birth out the Partakai 1 and Partakai 2 that would eventually build up to become the Taran and the seed atom for the inner cycle. So I'm still trying to get, okay, where do the Navejos go if you draw it in lines, right? Because we're looking at this strung out. These are actually showing cycles that are part of a sphere. So eventually, and this is what I was starting to get parts of how all these actually fit into a spherical configuration and what those spheres do with each other and what that has to do with all of the domain cycles and the cycle we're going through of the turnaround. But for now, if we can understand them as you have first creation point, and I always wondered why they did it this way, because they showed me to do it this way. Start here and work this way. So I'm working like from my right to my left. Okay, normally people read from left to right. It's like, oh, all right, whatever. So we started there. I found out in the little scribbles why. You'll see that tomorrow. But to understand first that we have our core domain that is formed from the first creation point. Then we have here would be where the Unisai seed atom for the inner is. And then you would have the inner Rasha and the inner outer light body, the inner outer light body, the inner Yukatharista body around the inner Rasha. And then that, they would cycle. Now, the cycle of the light body would be a yuga, and the cycle of the Rasha body inside of it would be the Naveho cycle, considered a Naveho cycle, that corresponds to that particular part of the yuga cycle that was between the sixth cycle, between axis 6, the Hidaro part. It was between axis 5 and 6, with birth of I think that's what it is. I have to look at that to actually explain it. But I think you know what I mean. I'll clarify it later if I just confused you. Anyway, let's look at it strung out. We have a core that is formed first, a Unisai seed atom for the inner. Then from that, we have the inner Rasha body and light body outside of it. And then that forms the next Partakai and goes through its Naveho cycle, births out the Partakai for the next one, and that grows into becoming the seed atom for the middle. The seed atom for the middle is called the Shadi. All right, that's what we've worked with in the sacred sex classes, because it's directly connected to our bodies here in the outer through our private parts, where our outer seed atom is at the Azare in the outer body, but where the Azare and where the seed atom is in the Edonic body or the middle body interfaces with our physical body here is where our private parts are and around the region of our base chakra. So there's a connection to all of, in our bodies, our physical bodies here in the outer domains, to all of these other layers of creation that we have had to move out through, which means we left a part of our consciousness in and an encryption of ourselves and our identity, our pure identities, our perfect templates as we came out. So we have the core domains, the inner domains. The next one's out from the Shadi seed atom are the middle domains, and then that goes through its Rasha cycle and then its light body cycle, and then that creates the Partakai for the next set, and those set of Partakai create the Tarn and create the seed atom for the outer, which is called the Yanesa seed atom that we talked about a lot in the Kathara 2-3 program, the crystal body program. And from that births out the Rasha of the outer domain and the light body of the outer domain, or the Yukatharista body of the outer domain that is our Ekamappus of the God world gates. All right, so this is the structure. This set of 4 moving outward from the creation point are called the Ikashi cycles, or the Akashi cycles. And they are the Akashi expansion cycles, moving forward from creation point, from that point of creation. Now, each one of them have all sorts of characteristics associated with them. The first thing associated with them is a particular name of the rasha body that corresponds to that level. The rasha body for the core is simply called the, I think this one is, they just refer to this as the rasha. The rasha body for, and I might, the rasha A, they call the cycle that, but I'm not sure if they call the thingy that. See that we're still just working on these. That's why we haven't released them anywhere. We're still trying to get all the words right and all the spellings right. All right, since I have it there, I would say the rasha body for the core is referred to as the rasha A. All right, so this would be the rasha A cycle, Navajo cycles. The rasha A Navajo cycles are called the Yamu Navajo cycles. And each Navajo cycle has a Nava phase of rounds 1 through 4, a Nave phase of rounds 5 through 8, a Navi phase that ends in a Navi harmonic of rounds 9 through 12, and each one of those corresponds to one of the rings and span sets of the rasha body. And then I just lost myself. Okay, 1 through 12, right. All right, let me see where it's going with that. Let me see what interrupted me first. Hold on, it came in from right. Hello, what's up there? There's something over there. That's the second time something weird's happened in the last hour or so. I saw a thing that looked like a cross between a rat and a prairie dog, but it was about that big, and it ran right in front of where we were walking to go to the hotel room, and I realized as I kind of went like that to try not to walk into it, it wasn't solid, which was weird. And I just got another something or other coming on over there. The blows are all right, though, they're saying. Anyway, they're saying get on with it. They don't have to spend forever on rashas. Anyway, right? Right. Yeah, is that them or is that you collectively? Right. So we have the rasha A body and cycle. This corresponds to the Navajo cycle that would be called the Yamu Navajosa. All right. And that has its 4 stages. Let's just leave it at that. Then when we get out here, we have in the inner, and these, by the way, the cells in these, the main cells structures, are referred to as the etons. All right. When we get out here to the next one out, which is the inner, this cycle, the rasha body is called the rashala. The rashala body also corresponds to, remember the Elon, Shalon, and Kalon sets that we talked about in rasha structure? Well, each one of these kind of works in a larger body that we'll see more of tomorrow. They each serve as parts of a larger structure, the spirit body. And in that larger part, this whole cycle it is predominantly an Elon structure. And this is where we get the names of yugas that go with them, where the yuga is the outer light body structure. All right, this is called the Ale Yuga, because this is predominantly the Elon storage part of the larger spirit body. All right, and so that's Yuga 2. Yuga 1 was here, the outer light body structure, the light body structure of the core cycle. That I think they refer to as the Rale Yuga. The Ale Yuga is the inner one, and the Yuga again is the light body cycle. And inside of that you have the rasha body, which here would be the rashala, and that would have its Navajo cycle. The Navajo cycle for the inner is referred to as the Kamu Navajosa. So you will see these prefixes when we use ring tones and span tones, depending on which rasha you are trying to activate, which currents you are trying to bring into the body out here. It will depend on which tones you use, which prefix you use with the tone sets, because all the rings and spans have the same tones, right? But it qualifies which domain you're trying to open energy from by using the prefix. This one would be the Yamu Navajosa, so the Yamu prefix. This one is Kamu, C-O-M-U. All right, that is the one for the inner. When we get out here to the next one, which is called the middles. Oh, by the way, these are called the Adon units. It's Adonic matter, and the units are called Adons. Where these are Etons, and the core of these are called Adons, and it's referred to as Adonic matter. All right, the next one out is the middle. This is return to Eden. All right, and this is what happens when you do your first starfire and enter an Adashi 1 cycle. All right, you have the Edonic matter, The edons are the names of the balls within balls. All right, the light cells are referred to as edons. This corresponds to, on the larger spiritual body, the Shalon band. Remember, we had the Elon band, the Shalon band. This corresponds to that, and that's why it's called the Shale Yuga. It's the third Yuga, the Shale Yuga cycle. And the Rasha body that goes with this is called the Rashali body. So you have Rashali in the middle, you have Rashala in the inner, and Rashae in the core. Still think it's just Rasha. But anyway. So we have one more set of them to go, and that's the third Yuga there. And this would have a Navajo cycle with it. This one, Kamu, the Kemu, the Shamu, and the Shemu. This one, I believe, is called the, I have it on another chart, the Kemu Navajosa. So Kemu, K-A-M-U, would be the prefix with the ringtones when you're trying to open the currents between here and here. And we've actually, each one of the tribes classes, the tribes 1, whole set of 12 tribes 1 classes, were supposed to, they were referred to as the Council of Rashala. They carried the codes, the ones who ended up, that's why the beloveds had it done by lottery down here, so they could tweak it from up there through the electricals, because they knew by frequency read, who had the codes for which ones in their bodies. So the people that got put in the tribe 1 set were actually the ones that carried these codes. And they were together collectively activating each class, each one tribe's class of tribes 1, activated one of the rings of the Rashala body in the Aquafarian host shield on the planet. When we got all through the 12 of them, then we were supposed to go into the tribes 2 classes. And the tribes 2 classes were the councils, and still are, of Rashali. The Rashali ones would have done the same thing. And starting with class 1, ring 1, would have progressively activated this part of the Rasha currents in the Aquafarian shield and host field. Each one of these corresponds to a level of what's called aquiline sun activations of the gyrodome host field on the planet that we'll talk about later. And then there's supposed to be a big event, because this one out here is called, the outer one, is called the Navajo cycle for it is called the Shamu Navajosa. And it was a calling of the shaman, where this set of people, and there are 24 in each of those classes, 12 classes each with 24. These we're going to have 12 classes each with up to 48. We're going to get them all together and do a huge, big Shadra shield and an event referred to as calling of the shaman. This was supposed to be done when later we were going to hit the Kalehara point. The beloved saw what was happening, and they have had to expedite since Peru, and we'll talk about why tomorrow, why they had to expedite what happened during the time we were in Peru, what happened with the FA groups and what they've done, that pushed it all, where this whole set was literally activated by the Aquafarian races on the Adore side. They just literally, in one night, blasted it into activation. They had to. Because what has to be done, we were only halfway through. I think we're up to class 4, which means ring 4 here. We still had all of these, the rest of these rings, all of these rings, and all of these rings to activate before those frequencies that would allow us to enter the first point of the Kalehara would happen. Well, if this planet and solar system went into Kalehara before the Aquafarian shield did, the Aquafarian shield wouldn't be able to anchor it. We'd get flattened by those frequencies just like anybody else would here that didn't have the aparthy open to receive them. So there was a push since Peru when we went in May, the Hitharo in May. And this one has been fully activated already. The rest of these were fully activated in Peru. These were activated in Peru, and they were going to save those for this. They were going to open both ends at the same time and let them meet and just run all the way through. So that and that were finished in Peru. The 12 tribes 1 Rashala Council class 5 started with activation of ring 5 out here. All right, class 6 activated ring 6 out here. When we hit the point of all of the rings out to 12, that's when I believe the Navi harmonic hits when 12, and then there's things that I still can't describe without looking at detailed graphs. But that is when we hit 12 activation, and then we start going into the frequency leap or fall. The leap would be where we generate enough frequency and activate enough of the bodies that opens the doorways between these core flows. Now, way back here somewhere, and actually at every transition point, before you get to the birth of the Taran for each one, there is something called the Eye of God. It forms from something called the Kusha crystal, and each domain has a Kusha crystal. In a turnaround cycle, the Kusha crystals and the Eyes of God progressively open. Well, the Kusha crystals are stimulated, they open, they cause the Eyes of God to phase and spark. And that begins the opening of what are called the Eye of God's core currents, or the Christ blood currents, or the lavas. They're referred to as the lavas, the currents of love. Where's the love? There's the love. Right, way back there behind the creation point door. Because what they do is allow the frequencies from behind the creation point door to come all the way through the Rasha bodies out into each level of the light body, all the way out here until we get to the outer body. And that is what gives us enough frequency to make the shift where we would go through the Hara cycles and into a full Christ star activation, and then make the rest of it's a 180-degree shift, turnaround, right? Where you make the 90-degree shift and hit Christ star activation, and then make another 90-degree shift to enter the Adashi 1 cycle. The Adashi 1 cycles are up here. Now, if we could pull this down a little, honey, please. Hello. Thank you. As we have 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a very simple way of showing the Adashi turnaround cycles. We'd finish the cycles out here. And these, by the way, these yugas, the light body cycles, are called the Kale yugas, because this is where the Kalan bands would be. So you had the Elan bands, Ale Yuga, the Shalan bands, the Shale Yuga, and the Kalan bands, the Kali Yuga. So that's where those teachings, any teachings that spell it Kali, that they were pulled from this information that was about, only giving you part of the information about the cycles and the Kali Yuga. The Mayans knew parts of it. The Sanskrit people have known parts of it for a long time, but nobody has had any of this since quite a ways back in Atlantis, actually. These are some of the teachings, because they could show. There were ways, the teachings that went with this, that taught some of the technicals, that with the Atlantean mind, because it was not as mutated as ours, and they were still extremely intelligent, and the FAs that were there at the time, fallen angelics there, they could do a lot of harm. So some of the teachings were actually taken back by the Eartha people, and like books and things that had some of it in it, because they were going to use them to try to take over Eartha and wipe out the Christ host here, which would have taken Earth out, and we wouldn't be having this conversation now. So there was the whole books of Kale were never brought. The books of Kale correspond to this transition and getting into Adashi 1, and they're the teachings that correspond to the transition and correspond to living and existing in the reality, three-dimensional reality domains of this space. Each one of these Adashi cycles, these are the respiritualization of matter cycles, where when we come out here from creation point, if you have behind the door of creation point, you have what would be considered a spirit body. So you have X amount of quantum in spirit and X amount manifest. The first has 1/3 manifest, and the rest of its quantum still in spirit body. That's the core. The inner has half of its quantum manifest in each. Half manifest on this side of the door, and half manifest on the spirit side of the door, in the spirit body. This one has, so we have 1/3, 1/2. This one has 2/3 of its energy, its quantum manifest on the manifest side, and 1/3 in spirit body. And when you get out to here, and this is why it's the most vulnerable cycle, and it's the only place things can actually fall, that you can actually lose cognition of connection that deeply, is there is 3/3 of its quantum are actually in manifestation, and none of its quantum are in spirit, but its spirit body is fully connected through this connection line, which actually is a center point, because all these, you're seeing spheres within spheres, just like